Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be joining from. I am HR Funk, and this is my firing line for Friday, November 14th, 2025. This is the online show that is completely driven by you, your questions, and your comments. Otherwise, I would be sitting here trying to check every so often to see if YouTube had deleted my channel yet or not. And if you saw the video that I posted yesterday, you know what I'm talking about. And what I probably should have said in the intro is this is the online firearm show that is completely driven by you, your questions, and your comments, unless I have a guest. And tonight I do have a guest. Mark Allen from BH Spring Solutions is going to be joining. And BH Spring Solutions is one of my oldest industrial partners with my channel. I am very, very happy to have Mark joining. He is going to be talking about a new service that BH Spring Solutions is going to be offering to anyone who might be interested. And I think if you've been following a lot of the recent events involving the handgun world, you're probably going to find this very, very intriguing. But before I bring Mark on, a couple of quick things. First off, there's not going to be a premiere video tomorrow morning. As a lot of you know, on Saturday mornings, I normally have the premiere video that kicks off at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And because I've got this show tonight and I had the video yesterday, and there's actually going to be a product premiere video that's coming up at 9 o'clock this evening to correspond with a product launch. Because of all that, I'm just not going to do the Saturday video tomorrow. So all of you who would normally be watching can take the morning off, have an extra cup of coffee, stay in bed a little bit longer, and enjoy your Saturday. Also, for any of you who might be in Northern Ohio, I am going to be at the Mansfield, Ohio Gun Show tomorrow. And I will probably get there somewhere around mid-morning. So if you happen to be going to the gun show, or if you're going to be, if you're already there and you see me, by all means, come up, say hi, let me know that you're a viewer. I'd love to talk to you. So I'd be looking forward to talking to any of you that might be there tomorrow, again, at the Mansfield, Ohio Gun Show. And I think those are all the announcements that I have for right now. Oh, one other thing. Depending upon how long Mark is here, normally a lot of you know that I run the show for at least an hour. So if he ends up having to leave early, I'll keep the show going for longer than that, and I'll open it up to viewer comments. And also, if any of you want to join as a guest, you'll be able to do that then. But I've been keeping him waiting long enough. I am going to bring Mark into the room here. And there he is. Mark, how are you doing, sir?
Excellent, my friend. How are you?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for joining. I always appreciate it when you are a guest on the show. And as I said, you and BH Spring Solutions is a friend of the channel that goes back to kind of the early days. I think I was probably only on YouTube for 4 or 5 years when we first met. And we started working together with the Glock safety that BH Spring Solutions was producing and is still producing as far as that goes. We tested that with my police department, and since that time, we have worked together many, many times. It has been wonderful through the years, and I am extremely honored to have you this evening. But I've been talking long enough, so let me turn this over to you because you have a new service that you want to tell everyone about.
Howard, thank you very much, and it is sincerely, it is my pleasure to join you. And my partner Slav and I have such high regard for you. I just can't tell you. And I want to say to your viewers, you know, you are in the right place. Howard is he's a guy that we just know we can always trust for the right opinion. We can always trust for we can always trust for good counsel and wisdom you know, back around the time that we first met, what this new service is about, and I want to try to say something here that keeps your folks' attention. And this is about the uncommanded discharge problems that have happened in the Sig Sauer P320. We have resolved those, and hopefully that's going to keep folks around for another 5 minutes. But how this happened is not a quick story necessarily, because well, let me just add one thing to this, as from the standpoint of credibility, I guess, for those who don't know us. Everyone knows John Browning. When John Browning passed away, there was a guy that came along that basically took his place for 35 years. His name is Leon Hubert. I have since found out that he is considered by the United States Defense Department to be the most prolific firearms designer currently breathing air. And he works for BH Spring Solutions. So he is now with us. And he was also the designer of the world's only drop-in manual safety for Glock pistols that we put on your department's handguns, back here 7 or 8 years ago. And
Mark, if I could jump in just to try to bring this into focus for the viewers.
Sure.
I know the lineage between John Browning and Leon Hubert because you've told me, but in between we had Dieudonné Sev, and I just wonder if you could fill in that blank so everyone understands sort of the progression down through FN and what Leon's place is.
Yes. Dieudonné Sev was working with John Browning, as well as John Browning's son Val Browning, when John Browning passed away, and that was actually in Liège, where his office was. And Leon Hubert is from Liège, and so when John Browning passed away, Dieudonné Sev basically became, their chief weapons and modifications designer. He finished the high power pistol. He redesigned John Browning's vest pocket pistol because Browning wanted to sell that pistol or something like it in the United States, and Colt had the rights to the vest pocket design. So Dieudonné Sev designed a different gun. Also the FAL rifle. When Leon Hubert, came along and become of age to work, he started at FN in aircraft engines. And about the time that he was starting at FN, Dieudonné Sev had become stricken with some health problems and had to retire. And Leon Hubert basically took his place. And among other things, Leon Hubert was the FN representative and designer of 3 different pistols that were entered in the 1984 pistol trials in the United States. He designed the SFS systems we have for high powers in 1911s. The Browning BDA 380, which if you've ever looked at which is also the Beretta 80 series, with a couple of changes, but he was the designer of that. If you've ever looked at a schematic for a Beretta 84 and a Beretta 92, and you can realize the Beretta 92 probably never happens without Leon Hubert, because there's a lot of copy work between those two pistols to come up with the Beretta 92. Because the Browning BDA 380, which was also the Beretta 84, was designed in the early 70s, and so. Anyway, Leon Hubert also designed FN's FNS9, which, a couple small tweaks, it became the 509, which, competed in the 2017 pistol trials. And right after, basically the Defense Department prematurely announced that the Sig Sauer was the winner, the 320 was the winner, there came this news that was like, oops, but this failed a drop test, and it was a butt drop, and so this, I guess, sent the Defense Department scampering, and they acquired from us 2 of those drop-in manual safeties that we put on your department's firearms. They put those through all of their tests, and it passed all their tests, which was relevant because Glock's specimen that they submitted had their own version of a manual safety, and it had some kind of problem, and it did not pass their tests. So they were looking for a backup plan, and I get a call one day from the Defense Department, and it's kind of strange, when your phone lights up and it says U.S. Defense Department, right? And okay, and basically they were calling for one thing, and that was to tell us, that somebody there, around the table had acquired a couple of those manual safeties, put them on Glocks. They tested them and passed everything. We had already tested them much more rigorously than they do. It had passed all of our tests, and their only question was, if we would need to go to our backup plan here, which is the Glock pistol with your drop-in manual safety, would Leon move the production from Belgium to the United States? And at that time, Leon was not with us as an employee, and his company had not, RDIH had not merged with BH yet. And I really didn't have any right to speak on his behalf, but I assured him that, one way or another, if that's what it takes, and Uncle Sam needs that drop-in manual safety made in the United States, I'll personally make sure that the production happens here. And then he did tell me, he said, I don't want you to get your hopes up. He said, we really do think, SIG is going to fix their gun. And that was, honestly, that was the last time I heard from the Defense Department. And it was the last time I even thought about the P320 at all. Because, we've had our own stuff to do, right? And so it was back early summer, mid-July this year. My partner Slav, hits me on our communication app and says, he said something, kind of off the cuff about the SIG P320. And I wrote back, I said, what about the SIG P320? And he goes, have you been living under a rock? And I go, apparently, and so he starts sending me these videos, and there are these videos of these, P320s going off in holsters. And, one was a law enforcement officer just literally getting out of his car. And in the act of just moving out of his car, it popped off. And there was another one, it was law enforcement officers who were wrestling a guy to the ground in a Walmart, I think. And one of their guns popped off. And then there was the one that the FBI, was able to get a hold of that, went off in the holster. They kept it in the holster. And that was the one that produced the FBI's 29-page report about the P320, and they deemed it a defective firearm. And honestly, right now today, that's a conclusion that we are now disputing, frankly. And towards the end of this broadcast, don't let me forget. I'd like to let people know how they can see this testing and proving video that we've made with the P320 with our modifications in it, and what we were able to do to this handgun. I think it'll be interesting for folks. It will be hard for them to watch it right now while they're listening to the live stream, though.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have seen the video, and it is kind of an attention grabber when you see everything that this particular firearm was subjected to. I felt bad for it.
Me too. I think possibly we bring a unique perspective to this conversation, this discussion, from the standpoint that my partner Slav and I have designed firearms modifications. We have designed components. We know what it is like and what it looks like when you're chasing a design. And after I saw, some of this misbehavior out of the P320 on videos, where clearly nobody could have been manipulating a trigger. And I know the inside of law enforcement holsters, they're purposely made so, nothing's going to be manipulating that trigger. That's a big priority of those. And, and then that got us interested. And then, one of our top machinists' brother, we found out, sat down in the chair and put one in and out of his left thigh, in and out of his left calf. And, the way it looks is he's probably never going to walk again, and he's probably never getting out of a nursing home. He already had some health conditions, but this really sent him into a big tailspin. And, he was an independent adult before that happened. A combination of these things, and, got us very, very, very curious. And so, and of course, with Leon Hubert with us, an absolutely genius, prolific designer. with 65 years of history to prove it. Um, we figured, we're going to see if we can figure out what's ailing this handgun and what's contributing to this misbehavior. And so we started doing our own sort of investigation or study into um, the Sig Sauer P320. One of the first things I did is I have all of John Browning's patents for handguns printed out, and they're about an inch thick. And I went back and I read all of them that pertain anything to striker fired anything, because he invented striker fired, he invented hammer fired, he invented the magazine, and virtually everything that we put our hands on almost, he invented. And there wouldn't be a Glock without him. So what I was looking for was, this is a striker fired handgun. The striker's fully cocked in a P320, just like it was in John Browning's designs. And I wanted to, refresh my knowledge about how is it that John Browning made these striker fired handguns what he called perfectly safe, which is a super bold assertion about your work. When you call a firearm, this is a perfectly safe design. And he was extremely serious about that assertion. And so I went back and I took in everything that John Browning did to make a striker fire design safe. And then we looked at Leon Hubert's FNS9, or the 509, and how he made a striker fired handgun that it seems to be perfectly safe. And we went looking into the P320 then for all of the things that are known to make a striker fired design safe, and basically they're all gone. And that was undeniable. But there's kind of a good thing here about this, and that is you got one guy who invented almost everything, and everybody else has been doing modifications to his patented designs, for the last 130 years. A lot of people don't know this, but on September 14th, 1895, the man filed 4 handgun patents. And I'm telling you, if you ever just go and look at what he filed for handgun patents in one day in 1895, he ran the table. And almost everything in handguns today, you can trace right back to that date. And so, it started to paint a picture for us, about what could allow a firearm to, be misbehaving, the way the P320 has appeared to have misbehaved. And, when it got really obvious that, people were just completely stretching out on this thing, just really going for, grasping at whatever they could, was this notion that, well, it was the holster's fault because it was squeezing the pistol too hard. What? It's the reason why we ran it over with a car. Because if you're going to think that squeezing the pistol with a holster is going to set this thing off, if we're going to modify it and assert that this is a trustworthy firearm, well, we got to squeeze it. So we squeezed it with automobiles, and nothing happened. And there were other, theories and things, and I'm just going to tell you, I've read through the entire FBI report, and pretty much they just were guessing. And the proof that they were guessing is because at the end of the day, this is a defective firearm. That means we don't hear about it anymore. Forget it. Right? They didn't figure it out because they didn't. And so they too were guessing, but the deeming it a defective firearm was just kind of throwing their hands up in the air, and we got better things to do. So what we went looking for specifically was how can we modify this handgun to add back the safety margins that John Browning designed into a Sear Striker operating system. How can we add back as many of those margins as possible? And if we find ways to do that, then how are we ever going to get anybody to believe it? When there's so much, it puts a lot of fear in people. I mean, when firearms start, going off of their own volition, my gosh, that is super, super unsettling to people. So, I'll give it away in the video that we'll let you know how to get to and how to see. I'm on the house throwing a P320 down the sidewalk. We dragged this thing down a very bad road for a mile, and it's just bouncing all over the place. We could not create a discharge of this firearm, no matter what we did, and we would like for people to see that. And certainly, we've all seen P320s misbehaving and popping off with far less stimulation than what we did. Almost like, this benign kind of thing. But Howard, here's the one that I think is really going to be a head scratcher, maybe for some viewers. But when you really think about this, all of a sudden, if you just follow John Browning's logic, and I keep going back to him, and I keep going back to his patents, and all of his handgun patents, all of his patents are available online. They're public record at the U.S. Patent Office, and they can be printed out. And this guy was an amazing teacher. In these patents, he's writing these patents about something that, prior to his dreaming it up, didn't exist. So he's writing about, what is this invention? And he's having to build the knowledge in a patent reviewer just from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. Because who would know what he's talking about? He's talking about something that didn't exist prior to, those patents. So he was, and John Browning did personally write all of his patent applications. And so he was meticulous in explaining how this works, what this does, how it interacts with that, how these parts cooperate together. And without fault, this guy was safety first, foremost, number one. And he was talking specifically about primarily user safety, but society's safety as well. And it's the reason why he put such a priority on what he called a perfectly safe firearm.
Which brings me to a question, if I could interrupt for just a moment.
Please.
There is a lot of content floating around out there with regard to the 320 where people are inserting screws and one thing and another into the trigger guard and wiggling, jiggling, shaking, stomping, whatever, and all of a sudden showing that the sear has released. Do you have some insight onto any of that?
Yeah, that is millions and millions and millions of wasted man hours watching this. I saw another one where a guy had a CNC machine and like this needle pressing against a Glock trigger, and he did it, and it was like 1,000ths at a time, right? And by golly, he got to a point in the chain of events that have to happen. He was able to manipulate the Glock, but this is novelty stuff. Virtually any firearm, one way or another, you can depress a trigger and you start a chain of events that have to happen in order to successfully fire the gun. If you let it go, basically stuff goes back to the way it was. I'm talking about before actually firing it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that's been, I look at that as this is another way that we have tried our doggonedest to figure out what's up with this handgun behaving this way, and I call it behavior. It's very bad behavior that we're witnessing. But the ironic thing, Howard, is the ironic thing is the what we have been seeing is not new, and I got this one day when I was reading one of those John Browning patents, and he said that striker is the hammer. The body of the striker is the hammer. And then the pointy part is the firing pin. And then he said, or striker. So he wrote the whole vocabulary. Take your pick, which the way you like it. He said it's, called either way, that you want. Most people who have been around the firearms world for any amount of time have encountered, experienced, or heard of an experience where people talk about this phenomenon called hammer follow. It's when the slide goes forward, either because you racked the slide and it went forward, or it went forward after, because it cycled because you fired a shot, and the hammer does not stay cocked. It follows the slide, or appears to follow the slide. And it, either gets to the half cock position, or it may go all the way to the firing pin and fire the weapon. A good example of this is and this is where things get completely impossible to diagnose when you start looking at these events that have happened and going, okay, well, that one happened this way and that one happened that way, and it looks like two different malfunctions, and it all gets very, very blurry. And I'll give you an example of how it gets impossible and how it gets blurry. One time I was shooting my 1911. I had shot 3 magazines. I was midway into the 4th one, and it doubled. I pulled the trigger once, and 2 shots fired. And then I finished that magazine, and then I shot 3 more magazines. So before and after the malfunction, there was like 25 rounds that everything was perfect, and after there was 25 rounds that were perfect. Why was it a malfunction that one time and not the other 50? And I mean, you can like send yourself into driving screws up triggers, trying to answer that question, because if you don't know where to look and you don't know what you're looking for, I mean, the punchline on that is if, unless we're talking about the very rare 1911 sear that is just completely wore out, or it's been over gunsmithed and the life has been shortened, it's always the sear spring. Mm-hmm. It's always the left tine of the 3-way spring in the grip frame. It's insufficient pressure on the sear. And when there's insufficient pressure on a 1911 sear, what happens is the hammer can slip the sear, because the sear is incapable of maintaining its proper position without sufficient spring pressure. And now, when you understand that the same nuance, same thing is going on in a striker fired pistol as a 1911, as when there's something called hammer follow, and you start looking at it that way, the aha moments start piling up, because now what you start to realize is, in order for the hammer or the striker to be cocked, the slide had to go rearward, and then it had to go forward. And if that thing pops off at any time before there's a trigger pull, that is delayed hammer follow or delayed striker follow. Take your pick. But that is what it is. And I started looking at this from the standpoint of back to that example of 25 and a malfunction, and then 25 more, and everything is great before and after. You can run yourself batty trying to figure out why the one time it malfunctioned and 50 times it didn't. You just can't get anywhere, trying to figure that out. And I mean, a lot of people, and especially engineers, God love them, who have to have everything black and white. And I love engineers, but it's true. The answer is the system is so on the edge. And we're talking about parts that are designed or programmed to cooperate with each other. In other words, the parts want to do the right thing. The parts are made to cooperate. But when there's insufficient spring pressure, sometimes they can't, and sometimes they don't. And when the SIG P320 has been firing, uncommanded, that can only happen by permission of the seer. And for anybody who's watching who I mean, this terminology could get someone lost if they're not very deep into the internals and makeup of a firearm. But basically, a seer is supposed to be boss. It's supposed to be a rock, and it has a position. And then the striker in a striker fired pistol lives in the slide, and it gets stopped by the seer. And then the seer cams down when you pull the trigger, and then lets the striker then go home. That striker in the P320 cannot morph itself into some different shape. It cannot go around, under the seer. I mean, it cannot morph itself into something else than what it is. It can only be going forward by permission of the seer. So the question when we started digging into the P320 is, why is the seer giving permission inappropriately for the striker to go home to the primer? And so I guess what I'm telling you is that was sort of exactly what we were going for when we first opened up a P320 was we have to find this out. What is up with this seer? And, what we found is there's about 70% less sear spring pressure on the P320's sear than, say, a sear in a Browning high power. And it's a lot less. And our the SIG P320, when I said that the margins of safety that John Browning designed into his striker fired pistols basically do not exist. Among those are an extremely like a perfectly hand-in glove fit of slide to frame. You don't have that with the P320. You got slop, and it's not, these things aren't very close together. In Browning striker fired pistol, he designed them in such a way that the manufacturer didn't have a choice. They had to make these things just so, the slides and the frames are like almost like they were cut out of one piece of steel. That makes sense because they are so fluid, but they also are very, very tight fitting together. That's to keep that striker and its proximity to the sear constant without the ability to move up and down. We can't change that in the P320. It is what it is, and it's not a margin that we can put back. However, more or increased pressure or authority for the sear with better or stronger springs, we found to be absolutely possible. And we added about 70% more spring for the sear springs. There's two of them in the P320, and we added about 70% more spring force and literal numbers of coils on the sear springs, plus the next thicker diameter spring wire, to boot. And, now the spring resistance on the sear with our prescribed modifications is about the same as what has worked in the Browning high power since 1935.
Which brings us to the pistol that you were testing that was being thrown off the roof and dragged behind the truck, and all of those other terrible things that you did to it.
Yeah. I've got when I made that video afterwards, I had mentioned in there that, I expected that we would, just decommission this thing with the ATF and whatever. Right. And okay, so then we were all standing around here thinking about it because, nobody wrote a book about what do you do with a gun that you've just tortured, and put through all of this. And I got to thinking about this, and I said, guys, I actually don't see anything with the slide that is a big problem. I mean, it's obviously it's scuffed up and scratched up. Most of it would be taken out with a media blast prior, to a Cerakote finish. And there'll be a little bit of specialized metal prep to, sand out some, stuff, but there's not in the slide, there's not like gouges or these, what you call deep gouges into the metal. No, nothing like that. And inside the FCU and everything else inside was completely protected by the grip module. And I looked at our guys and I go, you know what? Our FFL partner, and I told him, I said, you're not decommissioning that gun. Let's get a grip module and replace the grip module, and put a new sight set in it since the rear sight left somewhere down the road, and why not? I said, if nothing else, I'd be glad to have it. This is what we have found, and what we have found that we can do. I'll let your viewers in on. There's basically three things that we do to add back margins of safety, and one of them is we are about cumulatively we're about tripling the authority of the sear springs as compared to OEM. We also increase the one of the things that we found, and this was we only picked up on this because by comparing. John Browning consistently had a 1.5 millimeter overlap metal to metal of sear and striker. Leo Hubert, when he made the FNS9, one up John Browning, and he got about 1.8 millimeters of overlap. And what we've measured in, on a couple different P320 sears was one of them measured 0.9 millimeters and the other one measures 1.0 millimeters, which is thin as far as engagement, especially when you can have as much as a half a millimeter slop between the slide and the frame, only a millimeter of overlap. That's getting very thin. So we designed a modification for the sear that does increase that metal to metal engagement by about 30 to 40%. This is a safety margin add back along with the we call stabilizing sear, or sear stabilizing sear springs. And then the last one,
this greater sear engagement is just it just comes about from replacing the springs with the more.
No, we actually make a surgical modification to the sear itself.
Okay.
It's maybe the only time. This is where the P320 has been like one sort of irony after another, right? When have you ever heard of anybody taking metal off a sear and increasing the sear engagement? It happens in the P320, and so instead of having a millimeter or 0.9, it comes out to be about 1.4 millimeters that you have to clear metal from metal. John Browning's 1.5, Leon was 1.8, and everything has its limit, and approximately a 1.4 millimeter engagement is what we're getting. But the way that we're modifying the sear is another really important part, because one of the things that Leo Hubert was insistent about in the FNS9 and John Browning was incredibly insistent about was the channel in the slide where the striker lives should prohibit that striker from any sort of lateral movement, any sort of left-right movement. And in the SIG P320, you just don't have that tight of a fit. And it's possible to move that, a little bit left and right. So the manner in which the modification is made to the sear to get greater amount of engagement is made in such a way so that the striker, when it's engaged at the sear, basically has a little bit higher metal on its left and on its right, which is very discouraging to that striker wanting to move laterally, because any sort of lateral movement is a compromise of that all-important sear striker engagement. So basically what we did, and how we were able to torture this thing with a primed empty cartridge casing in the barrel and not have any discharges no matter what crazy stuff we did, it's because of not one thing, it's because of three things that are margin add backs into the design.
Okay. And for this process, essentially there's an alteration to the sear. There's new springs added, and the third component. What was the third one?
Stronger sear springs, so that the sear can stay boss. The increased engagement, but it's the manner in which we are making the modification that increases the engagement also creates a geometric disincentive for that striker to have any sort of this left to right lateral movement. And that becomes important from the standpoint that, well, what would make it move left or right? Drop it on its side,
Mm-hmm.
slam it on the table, whatever. That sort of lateral movement, or slop, I call it, cannot do anything except compromise or thin out the amount of engaged metal, being held in front of metal.
Okay, understood. So, all right.
We are also prescribing, and I say prescribing because BH Spring Solutions is the design arm and the components marketing arm of our company, and then one of our employees is also an FFL, and he is the high power medic, and the high power medic is the service side, and he handles all of this. The increased the sear stabilizing sear springs, they can be now purchased as of today at BH Spring Solutions. They're $18 a pair, but that is only the stronger sear springs. The other two things, this is really gunsmith work. It's not going to be something we'll be releasing any tutorials on and showing people how to do this, because this is really precision kind of stuff.
Okay.
And it's not really appropriate for folks to be doing that, on Saturday afternoon at the kitchen table. So
if somebody has a 320 and they want to have this service actually performed on their firearm, how do they go about doing that?
Well, best way to do that, first of all, would be to go to BH Spring Solutions. And if it's the service that you want, you'll look for a logo that says High Power Medic. It's going to take you basically off of the BH Spring Solutions site onto the High Power Medic site. Or also for components, and just general questions, 1-877-423-BHSS or 2477. That is a message service. It turns your voicemail into an email and sends it out to all of our personnel, and the most appropriate person will return the call. Or the other pathway, as far as the High Power Medic is concerned, and I'll have to get you this, I have to grab this telephone number real quick. The High Power Medic's service coordinator, his name is John, and he takes calls direct at 1-207-402-1984, and he arranges all of the High Power Medic's service work for all models.
Okay.
Okay.
So the place to start all this would be on the BHSS website, and then everything else sort of goes from there.
Yes, correct. You can't purchase the service from there. It's got to be arranged by a human.
Okay.
We are very, very strong about, work on firearms deserves a human to human attention. So that doesn't get automated. So John is the coordinator for the high power medic for all service, all incoming firearms for service.
Okay. And speaking of which, real quick, and I don't want to hit you with a curveball here, but I saw a video today that you just posted involving the Gersan compact high power. I'm trying to think what to call it.
Yes.
Regarding the recoil spring guide and the replacement that you folks have and how that all works. Do you want to comment on that real quick?
Yeah. There's a couple of things in the Gersan MCP 35 and PI that we have keyed in on, and I want to give a real compliment to them. The owner of European American Armory is a BH Spring Solutions. We have a video series called High Power University, and he is a junkie, and he became addicted to High Power University right as the pandemic started. And that's when we started High Power University. And, the next thing I know, he's telling me that, they're going to, Gersan over in Turkey is going to be making, high power clones. And when the first one came out from Gersan, we did an evaluation on it. And I get this, and when it was a video evaluation, and we released it in a newsletter, and about 30 minutes after the first session about that handgun, we found about a half a dozen things in it that could have been really better. And a couple of them, kind of constituted, marginal and defective kind of stuff. And within an hour of releasing that newsletter with that video going live, I got an email and said, "Hey, I saw the video. We're fixing everything." And they did. Pretty much. There's the high powers recoil spring guide rod has been a booger to manufacture since 1935. This one has not been an easy thing for anybody anywhere. So Leon Hubert, when he joined us, he designed for us what we believe is a superior guide rod solution for high powers. And in essence, one of the downsides of the high powers recoil spring guide rod is all of them are going to wear out. They all contain a spring inside that applies pressure to a little detent ball, and that spring loses its luster eventually, and it doesn't push as hard. The significance of that is when you don't have enough push from that detent ball in a recoil spring guide rod in a high power, you start to have a floppy slide stop. The slide stop doesn't want to stay in the down position anymore, because that is the command and control of the positioning of the slide stop is the recoil spring guide rod. So he designed for us a recoil spring guide rod with no internal spring, so it's a lifetime part. It transfers responsibility for force on the guide rod to the recoil spring. And Gersan tried to do it a little naughty because we do have, intellectual property protection on that design. It's a open guide rod head design is what allows for no internal spring, transferring responsibility to the recoil spring. And, they basically copied it, and they shouldn't have. But then what they did was, I don't know if they got confused or they wanted to make sure they didn't copy, or I'm not sure what. But they opened up the guide rod head design. Then they put a spring behind the detent ball anyhow. So it's sort of like you got the recoil spring pushing the guide rod this way, and then a spring inside giving it back. And so when I first got my hands on the detective model, or the PI model, the short barrel model, first magazine, the slide locked back, mid magazine. And I'm going, okay, how come, and we start looking, and there's insufficient downward force on the slide stop, maintaining it in the down position. So they're in the PI models, they're subject to basically, rattle up and hold the slide back, unpredictably at about any time. They went with a single flat wire spring. There's a downside to that too, and that is your slide velocity is cooking out of the box, you're sending empty brass at usually about 9-10 feet. And we have seen that when you start sending empty brass in a high power, anything past about 12 feet, you're unlocking the barrel before the bullet's leaving the end of the barrel. And you're giving that initial bolt thrust too much authority over the positioning of the barrel and the positioning of the slide without enough spring pressure. So the new guide rods for that model, and those work in the FM Detective, the old FM Argentine Detective models too. It is actually a flexible guide rod design. It is so easy to install. The Gersan guide rods are a son of a gun to take in and take out. These are just lovely to install and uninstall. There's 2 recoil springs, spring over this full-length guide rod. Controls extraction or ejecting distances of empty shell casings, typically with standard pressure and ammunition. When the springs are new at about 5 feet, 6 feet, this is just perfect. It's bullseye, perfect for that. So that product for the Gersan PI models and the FM Detective models, it has multiple benefits. One of the 6 things that we found initially that wasn't very good in the MCP 35s from Gersan was the ball in that recoil spring guide rod was protruding too far, and it was and to their defense, we know you're drilling a circle on a radius.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a tough thing for any machine, okay? And you have to have a special tool to actually do it. And the ball was protruding too far, and they attempted to fix that. Back here about a month ago, we took a what we call a BH Advanced High Power. It's with our SFS system and our trigger and all of our goodies in this high power, and we put it through a rigorous drop test, which it passed completely, but one thing. And the one thing was we had the slide stop was kind of dislodging from its install place. It was, kind of moved out when we picked it up a couple times. And that again is the recoil spring guide rod, because part of its authority, sorry about that, part of its job is retaining the slide stop in the pistol. That detent ball, it needs to be the right ball. It needs to have the right pressure on it. And we repeated that drop test, and we installed one of our guide rods and a Browning factory guide rod. And we had no more instances of the slide stop trying to migrate out of the pistol during drops. So that's what that's about. And that was just released and just announced today. And we have a stack of back orders for these from FM Detective guys.
I'm not really surprised, because in watching the video and seeing the solution to that, I thought it was fairly ingenious. It's outside the box thinking, and it looks like a very, very good solution to that difficulty that was being caused by the original part.
And that is heavily Léon Hubert. The guide rod head part, opening that up, that's 100% Léon Hubert. Slav and I just decided, he originally conceived this guide rod as just a regular full-length guide rod for a full-length high power, right? It was just going to be one single piece. And we decided that, we would make the head part because, we wanted, the full-length kind, but we wanted recoil buffering with an internal spring. We wanted ones for the FM Detectives and the PIs, and we've got some other plans too. And so we decided to separate the head from the tail, and make the head separately, the tail separately. But we owe that entire component to Léon Hubert. It's just his genius work.
Yeah, and I thought so too. Like I said, I thought that was very ingenious. Just the solution to all of that, and ingenious, I guess, in its simplicity, if that makes sense.
Yes. this guy has worked with us to optimize and get everything possible I think you can get out of a high power pistol. And you know, and Leon's still alive. He's 85 years old. He's still independent, you know, living in Liège, and he works, and he's working with us. And you know, there's, you know, I think he's going to work until the day he dies, like John Browning. I mean, it's you know, when I look at pictures and I realize that, you know, Leon and John Browning in pictures, my God, they have the same ears, they have the same chin. It's a little uncanny.
If I remember right, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, but Leon also designed the double action high power that came about in the early 1980s.
Yes,
And did he design the Mark III high power as well?
yes, he blueprinted the last version of FN's or Browning's high power, the Mark III. In Belgium, it was called the Mark III S. And yes, he was responsible for the Type 2 sear lever, it's called, which is you know, the firing pin blocking sear lever. Yeah, so because that was a complete redesign, actually, which also enabled them to make 40 Smith and Wesson high powers. That was another reason for the, you know, redesign, so to say. He is the credited designer of the Mark III Browning high power.
So, folks, if you're ever wondering about the wisdom or authority of BH Spring Solution when it comes to working on P35 high power pistols, literally the man who designed several variations of that handgun is working with BH Spring Solutions. I think that's tremendous. I think that's an unbelievable resource. It's literally like having John Browning's grandson that you can consult with for advice on that particular handgun. So that's just phenomenal.
In terms of what Slav and I know, we owe, you know, just so much to Leon. He is a fantastic teacher too, and it honestly, he's not replaceable. He's not replaceable. He had the original idea, because we redesigned the entire trigger subassembly for the Browning high power, and we're the only anybody who's ever done that. And we didn't just design, you know, like a wide trigger. We redesigned the entire subassembly, the trigger lever, the springs, you know, everything, the positioning inside the trigger guard, and so much more. We added magazine eject assist, which was actually, that was me that came up with that. But Leon was the first person of the three of us who said, you know, it's possible to have a redesigned, better trigger in the high power pistol, you know. And by golly, he was like sitting on a prototype that he had made. And we just Slav and I just, like, we struck gold, you know. And then it took us 2.5 years of refining and refining and refining in order to get enough margin in the whole system to accommodate, you know, like 30 different high powers of history. If you count all the manufacturers and all the different gens and all the different, you know, variants, there's about 30 guns, and all of them were made from different blueprints. So you have these slight differences between them. You know, you can't just design for the Browning high power and it's automatically go into all the different clones. And we were committed. We wanted to just try to have enough margin in everything, so it would be virtually drop in, or as, you know, close to drop in as possible in every high power of history. And Leon assured us that that was possible. I was the only one sitting on. I'm here. My partner's in Bulgaria and Leon's in Belgium. I'm the only one sitting on, you know, all of the high powers of history of the three of us. And I know Leon has not seen all these handguns himself, you know. And but he just kept assuring us and kept assuring us and kept assuring us. And we owe just so much credit to him. It just, um, we were able to, meet him and get acquainted with him, in 2017. And, a great friendship and a great business collaboration with him ensued. And then he, got to the point where he did not want to continue being having and owning RDIH, his own company over there. And, we definitely wanted, to take over the RDIH products and the RDIH business and the RDIH tooling. But, one of our biggest wants was we wanted him to come with all that, because we just did, and it was like, okay, you don't want to run, your own business anymore, but, we want you to be our chief weapons and modifications designer. So we got to work something out here, and we are sure that he was probably pretty elated about that. I think, a lot of people get to be 80, 81, 82, and, folks don't, expect these people to want to continue to keep working, and this guy is as sharp, I believe, as he's ever been. And we are so fortunate and so lucky to have this time, to learn from him and to work with him.
That is phenomenal. What an amazing resource and an amazing mind to draw from for all sorts of things, from a historical perspective, for his innovation and the things that he's coming up with. Even still, that's just tremendous. And Mark, we are at the 1 hour point, and I'm probably going to start to wrap things up here. But I really, really want to thank you for joining this evening. Again, if anyone out there is interested in more information on the services for the SIG P320 that are to be offered through BH Spring Solutions, or any other products or services, the place to start is the BH Spring Solutions website. Mark, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, we appreciate your friendship very, very much. And we did make this live stream, and the timing of it known to about 5,000 of our closest friends. So any of the BH veterans who are in the room and have been watching, thank you for attending. It's very much appreciated. It's very, very much important. That's about it.
Well, thanks again, Mark. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to take you out of the room just while I wrap up the show, but stick around for just a couple of minutes if you would, please.
You bet.
And again, everyone, that was Mark Allen from BH Spring Solutions. What an amazing discussion that we were able to have over the course of the last hour. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you got something from it. Again, if you're looking at taking advantage of that service for the SIG P320 through BH Spring Solutions, or any of their other services or parts or tools that they offer, by all means, go by the BH Spring Solutions website, and that's the place to start for all of that. Once again, for anyone that might not have been here at the very beginning of the show, there's not going to be a Saturday video tomorrow because of all of the videos that I posted over the course of the last several days. Plus, there's one that's going to go live at 9 o'clock this evening that's going to correspond with a new product release. So that's going to be coming up here in just slightly less than an hour. But that will be out there as well. We'll be back again on Wednesday for the Wednesday premiere video. That one will go according to schedule. And for any of you who are in Northern Ohio, if you're going to be attending the Mansfield, Ohio Gun Show tomorrow, I am planning on being there. I'll probably be there around mid-morning and probably stick around till early afternoon. I've got something else later on in the evening, actually, that I have to attend, so I can't stay up until closing. But if you're there and you see me wandering around, by all means, come up and say hi. To all of you who have joined tonight, thank you very much for being part of this show. for all of you who participate in the premiere videos on Saturday mornings and Wednesday mornings and whenever else they might pop up. Thank you as well to my channel members for your monthly contribution. Again, I really could not get by without that. To say thank you sounds so minimal compared to how I feel about all of you and everything that you do for me. So thank you very much. Everyone, have a great weekend. Have a safe weekend. I'll see you again next week. And until then, good shooting and bye-bye for now.